Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. So, guys, how many of you recognize what we are looking at right now? Very unique place. In fact, it's one of just a few places on the planet that is entirely its own entity unto itself. And yes, this is the Vatican, Vatican City. As we see the saints, the apostles, looking on down. So interesting how some things change, but in other ways, everything is still staying exactly the same. As Cindy's nodding her head big time. Yeah, and when you look at the history of the Vatican and Christianity, our religions, they just kind of morph. They morph and change, but there's these underlying truths and there's these underlying traditions that are there. So many people are not aware of, say the origin of Easter, Ostara. How it's really a spring fertility festival in so many cultures, and the whole thing about hiding Easter eggs, and then of course we have Christmas with Santa Claus. There's so many things that are borrowed from other cultures, and they take on a new life of their own in these new traditions as they pop up. And the Vatican is one of the wealthiest entities on the planet, if not the wealthiest entity unto itself. Treasure trove of art and all sorts of, there's so many things hidden away in the Vatican walls. If only we knew everything that they have. But they do have a telescope called Lucifer. You can't make up the stuff, really. And as we were talking about, like we were seeing, and we could see from here, you could see, there was 12 apostles. Now, in the olden days, there would have been the Olympian gods. And, as we know, there's a reason for the numerology, and we've touched on that in many other videos as well. But you see these things always popping up. Of course, there's 12 constellations as well, 12 tribes of Israel. We could go on and on and on, 12 months. It's obvious that there's certain things that are viewed as being very important and very symbolic, as we see, again, these statues here. And again, in the olden days, this would have been Olympian gods looking down, but now instead it's the 12 apostles. The richness of the Vatican is just mind-blowing, utterly mind-blowing. When, Christ himself is accredited with saying, if you want to go all the way, and really be my follower, then sell everything you have. Just come with whatever's on your back at the moment and leave everything else behind. Well, it doesn't appear that they're taking that route. Not at all. And you know what? We have an awful lot of poverty on this planet. There's a lot of other symbolism that we could see, and so many people have seen, and they call this Serpentine Hall, because you got these eyes here, as Cindy's giggling, that look very, very snake-like, reptilian-like, serpentine-like. And, there's a lot of symbolism here that perhaps is not, exactly what you would expect as we look at a statue of Moses. And why is Moses, and I've made 3 videos on this, depicted with horns consistently in artwork going back centuries? And, paintings and in statues, going back over 1,000 years, going back 2,000 years. Moses with horns. Very curious. And then we have the resurrection art piece, this sculpture. And many people feel this doesn't feel so light and fluffy and happy. This doesn't feel like it's joyous. It's a time of just so much love and happiness and joy. It's the resurrection. Why does it look so dark and twisted? And it's behind the Pope there. Well, we have to go back to the Etruscans, really, to look at some of the origins of the Vatican. And the Etruscans were an interesting people, and they had their own unique culture. As you see, some dancing frivolously there. And so the Etruscans occupied this part of the Italian peninsula and then expanded out over time. And, you could see Rome was under the Etruscan influence. And Rome, remember, it's the city on 7 hills, right? But so is Jerusalem, so is DC, so is London. The power centers of this Roman Empire that never really left. And we had talked about, too, recently in a video, the founding of Rome by Romulus. And when you look at the mythology there, it's pretty fascinating because there again, you have a lot of different things, including the ascension of Romulus, where he's taken up by the gods to no longer be with us, humans, us mortals here on Earth. And you got to wonder, okay, why is it the case, just like Enoch and Elijah, he was enveloped in a fog and then he was gone. And he was no longer walking with us, he was walking with the gods. Very, very interesting. And also the fact that, as we had talked about, he, along with his brother Remus, were put in a reed basket and floated down a river, just like Moses. All these myths, they come up time and time again. New cast of characters, but the same myths. And it's just fascinating to see it. And then also the fact that, basically it was a virgin birth. His mother was a Vestal virgin. And, and him and his twin brother Remus. So who was their father? Well, according to the legends, it was a god. It was actually the god of war. And it would make a lot of sense because, their prowess in battle and the way they were able to establish an empire that never really died. It just kept changing. And pretty fascinating stuff. So the name Vatican and the Etruscan goddess Vatica of the Underworld. What's the connection? So the Vatican is a symbol for Christianity. Well, it is what came out of Constantine's Council of Nicaea in 325, and then that whole tradition moving forward. We are told as Catholics that St. Peter was the first pope, but that is not really the case, and so many things are not really the case. So it makes you feel that the Catholic Church, as a Catholic, you grow up feeling that the Catholic Church, started with St. Peter. And in reality, it was convened in 325 AD by Constantine the Great. And he was a Roman emperor. And he, after 1 year after having the Council of Nicaea, where they came up with the Nicene Creed, which I had to recite thousands of times as a little kid, saying what I believe in, which, think about that. Think about how we program our kids, getting them to say things, what we believe in. We believe in, one God, indivisible, this whole thing. And it's just brainwashing is really what it is. It's bringing them up into a tradition that you were brought up with, instead of letting kids, find things out for themselves, giving them a little bit of leeway, allowing them to think for themselves. It's just the automatic conditioning that society does. And, I went through it too, So it's pretty fascinating to see, how things developed. And how did the Vatican get its name? Well, the Vatican's not even a Latin word or a Greek word, and it can't be traced to the Bible at all. So the word we associate with the church is closely linked to the Etruscan goddess Vatica. What? Well, where the churches are most of the churches are placed on top of pagan power places. These are places that the pagans had set up their own shrines and, made them into holy places because they're on ley lines. So they're on natural power grids, power centers in the earth. And of course, understanding the mysteries, because the Vatican has done so well at covering up the mysteries so that they could hoard the knowledge and the power for themselves, as is the case with, the powers that be, that word that starts with an I and ends with an I and has a couple L's and a UM in there as well. All these different families that really run everything. They control through keeping knowledge for themselves as much as possible and hiding the true history of the past. That has been done timeless times, and they try to sweep it all away so that we can't put it all together and figure out what's really going on here. So, yeah, Etruscan goddess Vatica. And it does predate Christianity, and we could see, too, when we look at the Pope's hat, it's the fish hat, the mitre hat, and it's a reference going back to Dagon and to Oans, the sea beings that came. The sea, well, they lived in the sea. They were depicted as half fish and half man. And they came out and taught us many things. Interesting when we look at all this. And I've talked about that in countless videos as well. So the Vatican city-state was founded on February 11th, 1929, located in Rome, Italy. It's the world's smallest independent country, both by population and area. City has a population of around 840, an area of approximately 108 acres. The Vatican is the symbol of the Roman Catholic faith, and its power and influence on religious people cannot be denied. And the Holy See's authority extends over Catholics throughout the world, of which there's over 1 billion. So, it's a huge, huge group of people when you consider it. And here you see the layout in St. Peter's Basilica, St. Peter's Square. The Vatican Palace, north of St. Peter's Basilica, is the residence of the Pope within the city walls. The Vatican is famous for its beautiful buildings, such as the Sistine Chapel, St. Peter's Square, and St. Peter's Basilica. The Vatican museums are filled with masterpieces of painting, sculpture, and other artwork collected by the popes throughout the centuries, in sometimes very nefarious ways as well. The Vatican Apostolic Library, located inside Vatican Palace, it's just amazing, breathtaking, the artwork that you see. The Vatican Library was founded in 1451 AD and holds over 80,000 manuscripts, prints, drawings, plates, and incubula, books printed prior to 1500 AD, written throughout history by people of different faiths across the world. To make ancient material available to the public some years ago, the Vatican Apostolic Library started digitizing its valuable ancient religious manuscripts and putting them online via its website. So they had, in 2014, they had 4,000 ancient manuscripts available online for free. And so the Vatican's secret archives are not as secret as many think. In 1881, Pope Leo the 13th allowed scholars to visit the private archives for the first time, and in modern times it's possible to get access to documents, but outsiders must know what they're looking for, because with 52 miles of shelves in the archives, the librarians prohibit browsing. And, all the good stuff is locked away somewhere. There's no way I would think otherwise. The name Vatican is a true mystery. It has nothing to do with the Bible, Greek language, or Latin. As many other Christian traditions and customs, the name we associate with the Church has a pagan origin. More than 28 centuries ago, before the legendary founding of Rome by Romulus and Remus, there were people called the Etruscans. About 3,000 years ago, the mysterious Etruscans settled in a region of central Italy that was known as Etruria, and they ruled the region of the Mediterranean before the rise of Rome. And so in the Etruscan world, women, unlike their contemporaries in Greek civilization, enjoyed great freedoms. And they're still trying to learn the language of the Etruscans, but over the years they learned a lot about their beliefs and their daily lives. And so, in fact, most of the knowledge we possess about the Roman civilization comes from the Etruscans. And that's pretty interesting stuff, and that's where the Vatican gets its name. It's of the goddess Vatica of the Underworld. So why would they name the Vatican after a pagan goddess of the Underworld?
Why would they name it? I mean, it's just so curious, the things that we're not taught and the things that they keep hidden. It's everything that's hidden is that's the real true meat of everything.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. It's so fascinating to look into this and to see this. So Vatica is the Etruscan goddess of the underworld who guarded the city of the dead on Vatican Hill in ancient Rome. Hmm. The Etruscans did not bury their dead inside the walls of their cities for that reason. On a hillside slope outside the ancient city that was destined to become Rome, the Etruscans established a very large cemetery. The area, which is now St. Peter's Basilica, thus became known as the Vatican. Vatica had several other related meanings in ancient Etruscan. It was the name of a bitter grape that grew wild on a graveyard slope, which the peasants made into what became infamous as the name of one of the cheapest and worst wines in the ancient world. It was also the name of a hallucinogenic weed, Vatica cannabis. Whoa. That grew on the slope and when chewed was thought to produce prophetic visions, much like the effect of peyote mushrooms. Thus, the word passed into Latin as a synonym for prophecy, and also as the name of the Etruscans' female oracles called Vaticina. Interesting stuff.
It is so interesting, and it's no wonder they don't want us to know these things.
Yeah, and as we said, everything just morphs. It morphs. And, they know where the sacred sites are, so they plot stuff right on top of these sacred sites and just rename it. In this case, as Christianity and as, Catholicism. But in reality, it goes back to the pagan roots again. And this is, everything has been redone time and time and time again. And, it's just so clear, especially like when we were just looking at Romulus and Remus again. We have the same myth that you have with Moses. And, and that's not even the first one there as well. They're constantly taking these myths and just morphing and changing names.
They do, and then they twist truths and to kind of morph people into their way of thinking to control us and get us to follow them, and that way they get more money.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of historians that talk about the legend of Rome and Romulus and Remus, and there's actually a lot of historical referencing of that. And this is another article on that, the Vatican and the goddess Vatica of the underworld. Fascinating stuff. The deeper you go in, the more interesting it gets, honestly.
It does. And it's the things that you wouldn't think to question. The word Vatican, I mean, who would think to question, to ask, well, what does it mean? Nobody, because we just take it for granted that it's that thing.
Yeah, and as we had referenced, with Constantine, he was a politician first and foremost. He was, an emperor. And as we had said, Christianity was growing, but Christianity was widespread and diverse, and not everybody believed the same thing. In fact, they argued for a long time over the beliefs, and there was no one set of beliefs until Constantine codified it, and he had his bishops write it up, and then we had the Catholic faith, and anything that deviated from that was then denounced as a heresy, and thousands died because they wouldn't convert to the new faith, and so they were put to death. So it was quite a horrible thing, and it obviously kept going on through the Inquisition, and we had the witch burnings, and then we had the same thing happen to the peoples of the Americas, the natives in the Americas, being forced to convert, or in many cases die, if not. And it's really, really sad, and there has to be attention brought to that, because we can't allow others to force their views on us, and everybody should be able to see all the evidence and then make a decision, because making a decision and living your life according to one set of codified beliefs of which you don't even understand the history is not necessarily something that is very illuminating. It kind of actually will keep us in the dark and keep us able to be manipulated. And it's sad when so many just trust authoritative figures because they are authoritative figures without ever questioning them. And we can see where that leads us to with the whole society we have going on in the world today. So it's a beautiful thing that knowledge is spreading and we're able to see the roots of things and where things came from.
It is curious, and isn't it interesting how they know to put the human psyche in fear, and then once the human is in fear, they'll listen and do everything they're told.
Yes, and it's time to put away all that, and it's time for a true new age of reason and enlightenment, and recognizing where our traditions come from. So, my friends, I want to thank you so much for your support, as always. We couldn't do it without you guys over on Patreon and on Ko-Fi. With everything going on in this world, thank you so much for your support. And as always, God bless and namaste.
God bless and namaste.